And we will, again, we're so grateful that WeBank is sponsoring this today. WeBank West, WBEA, WeBank Orb. We're so grateful for their sponsorship. And I see Sheila sharing, my sister keeps calling me on Messenger. When she and I don't answer, she texts then calls. I text back, I'm working. Absolutely. Don't you love that? All of those little dings, or you see if your phone is next to you, you see texts or calls coming in, and it's hard, right, to know, okay, which of these do I respond to, and how do I maintain my focus? So we're going to talk about some tips today. So thanks for sharing, Sheila.
Okay.
That was intentional. So that is many times, right? We all have pets. We have barking dogs. We have meowing cats. That can be one of the distractions we might have in the background when working remotely. So that was a barking dog tape. And then also we may have children. So children who are coming and interrupting and needing things and needing to be homeschooled, many of them now. What a challenge that is. This is a reality check. And many times when we have things like this going on, we can feel like pulling our hair out. So that is really why we titled this, The Remote Remedy, Work from Home Without Pulling Your Hair Out. So I'm Dr. Sharon Lamb Hartman. I'm CEO of Inside Out Learning, and I will be kicking this off today. I'll also be coming back at the end and closing out. I'll chime in the middle a little as well. Randy Ganesius is our tech expert, and he's our main presenter today because he is a tech wizard. We're so grateful to have Randy on our team. He's actually also working on a cybersecurity team in Seattle, Washington, and he can answer a lot of the questions about security that we're hearing right now as well on Zoom. And Samantha Farazig is our amazing program manager, and she keeps track of everything, all registrations, helps make sure our programs run efficiently. So grateful to have Samantha on the team, and she's going to be our moderator today. So if you have questions, you can put them in chat. She will make sure that they're addressed and answered. If we don't have time to answer all questions, we will make sure to answer them after the webinar when we send out some information like a handout on this webinar. So if you can go to the ground rules, Randy, I'm just grateful to have this team supporting me today. And if you have any questions, please make sure to ask as we're going through this. So you can go ahead at the bottom in the chat and you can click on it and you can ask a question. We're going to stay muted to help avoid oops, I thought I was on mute moments, which can lead to a lot of funny moments. And if you have any technical issues, this webinar and the handouts will be available later today. So we're taping this so that you can have a copy of this. So I'd like to get a sense for who's in the audience today. So how comfortable are you working in the virtual office? So why don't you think about that on a scale of 1 to 5, which might be, you know, your grandmother is a 1, right? My computer has a virus, I better wash my hands, right? Or I should be teaching this class. So on a scale of 1 to 5, think about where are you in terms of how comfortable you are in working in a virtual office. And we're going to do what's called a poll. This is one of the interactive techniques you can do, and we'll show you how to do that today. So what you're going to do is think about what number do you most resonate with in terms of how comfortable you are working in the virtual office. Click the number and hit the submit button. And then what happens is Randy's going to be monitoring that poll and put the results up. So we'll be able to see. This is a quick way of getting interaction right from the start. And again, we will show you some ways of how to do these polls on Zoom. And they also exist on other platforms as well, like WebEx and Google Hangouts. So if we take a look, this tells us a lot of good information. All right, so you can see, you should be able to see the poll results here, where about 50% are saying, hey, we're above average, we're pretty comfortable working in a virtual office. Then we go to average, right? And then some of you feel, hey, I'm pretty good, I should be teaching this class. And then a couple who are 1 or 2s. So we can see, wow, this tells us who's in our audience today. So that means we have to cover the gamut. We have to show some advanced things for those of you who feel you're above average and could be teaching the class. And we also need to show some introductory things as well. So we'll make sure to cover that wide range today in the webinar. So the purpose of today is to provide the remedy and tips for successfully working from home. And we want to prevent you from pulling your hair out. We want to prevent you from disliking any human or pet that you're living with. And we want you to make that transition with ease, efficiency, and productivity. Some of us are used to working from home. Like I have a home office, but there's been a lot of difference even in that, where there's a lot more Zoom with videos happening right now versus phone conversations. And so the outcomes we're hoping today is that you're going to feel more confident and comfortable working remotely, and that you're going to learn at least 3 new tips that help you to make this change successfully. So I really hope that at the end of this webinar, you say yes to both of those. So 3 things we're going to cover, and we're going to do another poll. 3 things we're going to cover today is how to best set up your home office, how to minimize distractions, and how to feel confident and competent working with video conferencing technology, because we all need to do this. So I'd like it to do one more poll. What's your most important topic out of these 3? Because we're going to start with that one. We call that the hottest topic. So we want our audience participation to know which is the hottest topic. We're going to cover all 3 of these today, but what's the one you most want to start with today? So Randy's going to put the poll up, I think. Is it working, Randy?
There it is.
There it is. All right. So take a vote and say, what's your hottest topic? Where do you want to start today? And you can push the cursor right in the middle of that circle and push submit. And we'll do a tally. And again, we will show you how to do these polls, because that is one of the interactive techniques you can use to keep meetings engaging and meaningful and not just boring. I just sat through one the other day that went from 7 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon, and all they did was large group conversations and charts, PowerPoint charts. And I know that everyone was multitasking because it was not engaging and it wasn't interactive. So let's take a look at the results of the poll, Randy. Great. So we have the hottest topic right now is how to minimize distractions in this group. And then we'll go to the technology and then how to best set up your home office. So I'm going to turn this over to Randy, who's actually going to show us a little bit about the Zoom, how to optimize the environment first, and then go right into eliminating distractions.
All right, thanks, Sharon. So the first step in this experience is to make sure you're viewing this in an optimal way. So the first thing is let's walk around the interface very quickly. Obviously, we need to know where the mute button is in case we have that barking dog or that meowing cat. Or if you have to do something on camera, let's say you have to sneeze and you have to blow your nose, hit that stop video button right away. The other thing is the chat window. It might not be visible on your screen right now. And if it isn't, just click that little chat button right there. And then the participant list, this is where you can see who else is in the room. You can also mute yourself from that panel as well. And then the layout, where things are seen on your screen. These are the buttons that you can press to change the viewing experience that you have right now. And then finally, if you have someone that maybe they need to get the meeting information and they don't have they can't log in, maybe they just need the access code, that's where you can find the information in case you need it right away. And the chat button, again, click there and the chat window pops up in the lower right. But then again, if you can't see any of those, this is where you can access those buttons. So down at the very bottom, if you click the participants button, that's where you can see the option to turn on the panel. And sometimes if you're looking at this with a screen that's maybe a smaller screen, sometimes the buttons get condensed into the more button there. So click that, and that will allow you to see all of the other options. Let's see. Now we're going to cover the basics, but then again, there are the even basics, like how do you log on to a webinar? You're obviously here, but for those that are experts, or maybe you hit 4 in that scale that we in the poll earlier, you're probably getting hit up with a lot of requests for help. So this is something that you can hand off to someone that is just now getting familiar with the video conferencing platforms that are out there. So this is going to be available in the download today. So let's get started with the distractions. Now, this is a video, a lot of us have seen it. This is someone being interviewed. I think it was on the BBC, the British Broadcast Network. And his child comes running in from behind, and then his second child comes in, and then his wife comes in. But all of that could have been easily prevented. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the boundaries, preventing those other distractions that might be happening around your workspace. And we're also going to talk about some apps and tips. Now, first and foremost, establish those rules. So first thing I do before I even jump on a webinar is let my family know, hey, I'm going to be jumping on a webinar. So be quiet in the house. And from this time to this time, make sure you don't use up all the bandwidth. So just some boundaries and expectations that you can put up front. Now, I mentioned the frog story where my child walked in. Well, he didn't walk in, he barged in and announced the word frog, but the audience heard a different 4-letter F word. So things like that. Now, my son probably wouldn't have been able to read a sign like this on the door, but at least it's a visual cue for people not to disturb you. And then there are the desktop distractions. If you're sharing on Zoom, there's an option to turn off notifications, but if you're using a Mac, there are settings for that as well. Now, again, this is going to be available in the download, so you don't need to take notes or take screenshots. You can just follow along and know that this content is there for you to review later or to share with people that need it. Now, visitors, I have a Ring doorbell, and what that is, it's a video camera in my doorbell. So I know when people are either soliciting or dropping off an Amazon package. So if you're in a meeting and you're on camera, you can use this to easily identify whether or not you have to get up from your desk and check who's at the door. And then again, there are so many tips out there. These are some of the ones that I used over and over and I reference often and I share often, especially when I have that colleague that is creating the distraction. So this is something that'll be helpful for you and your team. Now, speaking of you, what about those times when you are the distraction? Again, we have to know where to quickly mute ourselves or stop our video so we're not doing something distracting. And then there are the devices that we're surrounded by nowadays. And one of the easiest things to do is either hide them, put them on mute. But again, we have some things that help with the things that pop up on screen or security updates that pop up on your screen. The other thing is noise. Whenever you're using your computer microphone and the speakers, sometimes you get that background noise, and it's usually someone that doesn't have headphones on. So one thing that you can do to be a courteous team member on a video conference is just put a set of headphones on. And then try not to do too many things on screen, like maybe adjusting your camera or adjusting your laptop screen, because on some laptops you have the cameras built in. So whenever you move your laptop around or adjust the screen, it becomes a distraction. And of course, this is my biggest pet peeve when people are typing. We're all typing, we're all multitasking. And if you're going to type, just make sure you hit the mute button. But before I move on, are there any questions? Pretty basic stuff, but it's a 2020, but we still don't have people with that natural instinct to hit mute, right? But feel free to post any questions in there. And If not, if you have any questions later, feel free to still put them into the chat because we should have some Q&A time later. What tips do you have when using 2 monitors? And okay, and to be sure you're facing the camera. So I have 2 monitors. One has my presentation. One has the Zoom interface right below the camera. So one thing that you can do is if you're doing a presentation, move the presentation to one monitor and then move the Zoom interface to, or WebEx or Google Hangouts, whatever application you're using, underneath the camera. So that way, when you're looking at your content or your notes or whatever you're typing, it looks like you're engaged when you might actually be chatting with your colleagues. But yeah, that's a good question because last thing you guys want to see is the side of my head where I am losing some hair and I'm trying to be engaged, but I'm focused more on my content than you. So that's another thing. When you as a presenter are not looking at the camera, that gives the audience permission to disengage. So just think about that. Just the simple monitor placement and your programs can be very impactful for your audience. Okay.
And if I could add one thing, you know, some of us have children, and even when you tell them, please don't come in, they may come in anyway. And if they do, I sometimes will tell, if I'm in a big meeting, I'll say, you know what, I just want everyone to know, I've told my children not to come in, but if they do, I apologize. And that kind of sets the tone because everyone can relate and no one's expecting perfection in these times. So then if a child does come in or a pet, you might say, you know, that you might hear my barking dog, I apologize. Just say it up front, and people are very understanding in these times if you do happen to have an interruption.
Yep, thank you, Sharon. So along with that, along with expected noises, there's a garbage truck that is, I can hear the garbage truck approaching right now. But the thing is, remember, if you use headphones, chances are you're using something that has noise canceling features in it. So another useful tip for eliminating the distractions for your audience. Okay. So video conferencing basics was next on the list. So let's go there. Can we relate? We have some people in our audience that we can relate to. And yeah, this image might be overused quite a bit, but there's so many things that you can plug and play in here. It's funny. But we're going to talk about the basic things when it comes to your system. And one thing that is at the top of everyone's mind right now is security. So we'll talk about that first and foremost. But along with the other functions that you need to know when you're jumping onto any video conferencing platform. Now, we've heard it in the news. There's a lot of issues with Zoom, and some of them are actually just blown out of proportion. Some are legitimate, but the idea is that we just want to make sure that we do our due diligence, put passwords on our meeting rooms, don't share links on social media. That's actually what causes a lot of these interruptions. In Zoom and in WebEx, there is an option to remove people and remove them permanently. So make sure you look at those different settings in Zoom. Now, as mentioned, this applies to all of the other platforms out there. WebEx, for example, also has had some security flaws that had to be addressed very quickly. It's just that right now, Zoom is very popular, and therefore the hackers tend to follow what is popular to exploit it. But we won't go too far into the details. If you have any questions about that, I can answer those later. But again, this applies to pretty much all the platforms out there. In fact, everything that we're going to talk about today, it's mainly on Zoom because many of us are flocking towards Zoom right now, but many of these tips apply to all of the other platforms out there. Okay. Now, part of the experience when you walk into any meeting space is to know who is in the room. So as an attendee, you can go in the participant list, and that's where you can see your name. Now, typically when you sign in, you use your name, but when you use, let's say you're using a computer in the conference room and it's already set to a default name, this is where you can change your name, because not only do you want to know who's in the room, just like any other physical meeting location. You want people to know who you are. So that's where you can easily rename. Now, the other thing is from the participant panel, this is where you can also change your name and mute yourself, stop your camera. You can also chat directly with other people through this panel here. Now, if you're presenting or if you're a host, you have a ton of other options here. You can, as I mentioned, you can remove people if you're the host, if they weren't supposed to be in there in the first place. You can also make other people presenters or request other people to start their video. Now, there have also been some articles in the news about how hackers are getting into cameras. Really, this is not a feature, this ask to start video feature. It's not something that I can turn on and make your camera turn on. What this does is it just asks you, hey, can you start your camera? And that's where you have the option of turning it on or just declining that request. So I can't turn your camera on for you. Now, the other thing is the use of these non-verbal controls here. So they're useful when you're talking and you want to know whether or not the audience needs to, or we need to go faster in the presentation or slow down. So these are some options that you can use to get non-verbal feedback from your audience, or a simple yes or no question. They're perfect for meetings that use Robert's rules of engagement, for example, where there's a consistent vote. So you can use these controls for that. Now, the chat feature, this is super important. Sometimes people chat and they unknowingly start chatting with the audience instead of to one person in specifically. So you'll notice that there's a drop-down menu in the chat box there, and that allows you to chat directly with people. Now, the other option is to go to the participant panel and chat directly with people there. That way you don't run the risk of accidentally sending a message to everyone. Maybe it's some sensitive information, which you probably shouldn't do in the chat anyways. So the other thing is, yeah, double check. And when it comes to sharing content, this is where some people get tripped up. But before we get into some of the pitfalls that I commonly see in video conferences is the basics. So to share, you just click that little share button. You have to have permission, of course. You have to be a host or a co-host. And what happens when you click share, you have all of these options here. You can share pretty much everything that's open on your computer. But in the advanced tab of Zoom, you also have these controls. Like right now, I'm only sharing a portion of my screen. I'm sharing the monitor that has the presentation on it. So it's great to have these other features. If you're a doctor and maybe you have a second camera, so one for you and one for an item that you need to demonstrate to your audience, it's useful to have that second camera option. And of course, if you are sharing and you have content on the cloud somewhere on Dropbox or Google Drive, you can access those here as well. Now, this is what trips up most people when they start sharing for the first time. They hit share, everyone sees their desktop as they should, but then Zoom's controls or WebEx controls for that matter, they all disappear. Now what happens is it floats up to the top. And with the screenshot right here, this shows you where it is. It's usually at the top. You might have to mouse over the top of your screen, but that's where the controls are. And when you're chatting and you're sharing your screen, you don't see the chat box by default. So that's where you can find those controls as well. Now, the other thing is when people share video, this is also where people get tripped up. They forget to share the computer audio. And that's what this option right here is for. It's to share the computer sound. So you heard the barking dog earlier, the intentional barking dog, and that's because we had that checked. The other thing is if you're showing a video clip and there's a lot of motion, make sure you use that optimized screen sharing feature, because what happens is it speeds up the video that's being shared. Now, the reason why you don't want to use it, let's say you're sharing content with a lot of data, lots of little details. That's when you don't want to use that, because what happens is your video becomes much clearer to the audience when you don't have that checked. So consider that when you're sharing video or sharing data. Okay.
Hey, Randy, we have a
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Mila would like to know, is GoToMeeting the same concerns around security?
Yeah, yeah. So again, it doesn't matter which platform you're on, you have to go through the due diligence of making sure that the meeting information is secured. There's even a host key that I very often see getting shared. Whenever a meeting or a webinar is created, a host key is also created. That's, as it sounds, it's the key to run your meeting. And the reason why we have the host key is, let's say your computer crashes and you have to jump onto the webinar as a host. You need to have that key to take back permission and take control of the meeting. So one thing that I see very often is people share that in the invite. That's a big no-no. So along with that, just make sure you safeguard the sensitive information that that should belong just to the team or yourself in a webinar. The other thing is the use of links. Whenever you share a meeting link, sometimes it has the password in it. And that's the reason why we see a lot of these what's called Zoom bombings, where people, they share the link, but they unknowingly include the password in it. So that's been addressed. And the other thing is when you don't have a password, that's the other thing. You have to have a password if you want to protect your webinar, because once someone has a link, anyone can get into it. Okay. But that's a great question. Now we're going to go into the intermediate to advanced features, but we're just going to give you a quick preview because there's so much content. And one of the things that we've seen is we've seen some of these webinars go on to tangent because there's so many details. So we're going to go with the basics and just how to get started with them. So the first thing is polling. In fact, let's do a quick poll. Now, change curve. Sharon is an expert when it comes to organizational behavior. So I'm going to run this poll here, but I'll let Sharon talk to it.
Absolutely. So one of the things we do at Inside Out Learning is we design transformative programs that both virtual and in person that can help you to move through change and can help change mindsets and behaviors so you can achieve exceptional results. So this is a typical change curve. These are stages people go through when walking through change. So this is an example of how you might use a poll. So you could say, you know, think about, we have done so much change in the past few weeks, right? I mean, when you think about that, we've gone from being able to go have dinner with a friend or a colleague, or going out for a coffee, or running to the dry cleaners, or going to the grocery store without masks and gloves on. I mean, our life has been changed significantly. And so when you look at this change curve and you look at these stages of change, where do you think you are right now in those stages? And just kind of pick the one that's most resonating with you today, and you can click on it and hit the submit button. And then Randy will show the results of the poll. So we did 2 of these in the beginning, which is often a great engagement tool to get to know your audience in a meeting. But also now when you are in a meeting, you can use a poll to get more participation and interaction. So go ahead and pick what stage you are most resonating with today, and then hit the submit button. So then we can see, look, you know, many of you have moved into tentative acceptance and exploration, a few in resolution, and a few at the early stages as well. And I just appreciate where everyone is. You know, the key to the change curve is to accept where everyone is and to not judge where the other person is, or to think, hey, they should be where I am. So if you can help people to express their feelings, it will help them to move through the change curve. And that's something we have to keep in mind in these times, is to exhibit that empathy and compassion to allow them to do that and support one another in doing it.
All right. Thanks, Sharon. So to use the polling feature, it's simple. You just have to have the right features turned on. And the thing is, you also have to have a license. So there's the free version of Zoom, but then there's the paid for version, which includes this. Now, we can talk features and details all day about what platforms have what, but we're focused on Zoom here. But most of the platforms out there, pretty much 99% of them have polling features in them. But in Zoom, to start it, you just click on the poll feature down there. And when you launch it, you have the option of editing it right away. But a good rule of thumb, make sure these polls are set in advance. So these polls that you saw earlier today, they were already plugged into Zoom. Now, as you noticed, you saw the results pop up on screen, and you have the option of actually showing it. But if you're doing a quiz for, let's say you're a teacher and you want to give a quiz, you can actually use these polls as a way to test your students, because at the end, you can get the results and have the names attached to who answered what. Now, the whiteboard and annotation tool, it's very, very engaging because it is an easy way to create interactivity. But Sharon, do you mind talking to this chart here? This was a fun activity that we had in one of our past webinars, but do you mind speaking to this?
Yeah, so just if you were in a room, in a meeting room, in a conference room, you might have a whiteboard or you might have a easel pad and you want people to write on it or draw on it or do an activity on it. Well, you can do that in a virtual meeting as well. So this is called the annotation tool. It's also called a whiteboard. So what we'd like you to do is, Randy is going to explain how to do it, but we'd like you to draw your favorite quarantine activity thus far. So he'll explain how.
Yeah, so at the very top of your screen, you should see a View Options drop-down menu. And from there, you can click Annotate and then select the Draw tool. So I'll go ahead and turn that on now. And you should be able to start scribbling on screen. Now there's a catch. When there are so many participants, it can start to look like when you first got your Etch-a-Sketch.
Right. Right. This is looking like abstract art right now. I kind of like it though.
Yeah, but through the noise, you can see the martini and the wine glass. You can see the ocean there. So it looks like maybe some people love the water. And I see a book. I see a book. I can relate to the book. But yeah, so when things get out of hand, so that's another thing. This goes back to the security issue that we were talking about before. But let me go ahead and stop the annotation for now. Actually, I'm going to take a screenshot of this because this would be a great example to use later. So let me stop the annotations. One thing that you can do is, let's see, give me 1 second. I'm going to keep the annotations on screen here just as to explain something. When you keep the annotations on screen and you progress through your slides, it starts to become a compounding mess, a hot mess, as the kids say these days. So one thing that you can do is, once annotations are done, clear the drawings. But let's say that we have that security issue again where someone jumps in and they start posting things inappropriately. You have the option of disabling the annotations for the participants. So be very quick to use that feature. Just practice knowing where that feature is. And that way you don't have any interruptions in your presentations. But well, the other things that you can do are obviously the stamping tools that you saw. Let me bring those up really quick. There's a stamp tool, a text tool. So if you have an activity where you need to type something in as part of a feedback session, for example, you can use those tools as well. But this is another example, and it's a very useful one. When things start to get too abstract, we can get to things that are a little more objective when it comes to personality types. But Sharon, do you mind talking to this one as well?
Sure. So this is another tool we use in our programs to really help you to understand your audience and understand yourself. So these are 4 different types of people. And there's people, party people, planner people, and point people. And if you read the description of each, I want you to think about which one do you most identify with? And then Randy's going to show you how to go and use the annotation to click and put a check mark next to the one that you most identify with. So you want to go up to that view options. Again, if you go to the top of your screen and hover around the top of your screen, you're going to go to view options. You're going to go to annotate, and you're going to go to the stamp this time. And you can choose whether you want a check mark or a star or a heart, whatever that is, and click on it, what you want, and then go to the personality type that you most identify with. So we've got people putting different annotations on, hearts, stars, check marks. So we've got a lot of planner people on the call today.
I like how the point people are putting them precisely at the ends of the lines there.
Exactly, because it makes us feel good to check things off our list. Yes, I love it. Chris puts his name or her name. I love it. So that's great. I feel then you could use this as a dialogue tool, and you could also even put people in small groups around what personality type they are, or mix the groups and give them something to talk about in the group. And something to keep in mind is when you are thinking about knowing your audience and tailoring your message to your audience, really think about who is the decision maker in your audience, and you want to talk that language, not your own, but their language. So that's a quick teaching on this tool.
Hey, Randy?
Yes.
We have someone who is not getting the annotate button. It's grayed out.
Yeah, so we turned it off a few moments ago, but whenever it is turned on, then that's when it's available. So I might have disabled it at a certain point when they started to access that feature. The other thing is most platforms, if you're using the web version of, let's say, Zoom, some of those features are not available. So just keep that in mind when you're launching a webinar.
Yeah, so the version we're in right now of Zoom is called Large Group Meetings. So it is a little more per month, but it allows 1,000 people to get on, and it allows you to do all of these different things like breakout rooms and annotation. Whereas the webinar version allows less. You cannot do breakout rooms with the webinar version, and I think one other, but I'm not sure which one, Randy.
Yeah, and so we can share a list of a comparison chart of all of the features as well. But along those lines of sharing information after this, I see that Andrea said that she couldn't see the draw option. So we'll send, if there's anything that we missed or anything that you have questions for later, we'll reply with the solution, or maybe even a video clip of how to do something that you're asking for. Okay. But along with the breakout rooms that you mentioned, Sharon, I'll quickly talk about those. It's a very, very useful feature in all of these video conferencing platforms. And what's nice is you have the main room, but then you want to break them out into smaller groups, maybe to talk about different topics. Maybe you're a project manager and you want people to focus on this area of the project and another area of the project in another room. So that's the nice thing about using the breakout rooms. And with all of these platforms, you can jump into all of them as the host, which is nice if you're moderating, for example. So in Zoom, it's 50 rooms. I'm not sure how many are in WebEx, but it's relatively the same number. And the other thing is, in Zoom, you can manually assign people to rooms. So in this example here, we just click on assign, and then we can select who to put into each room. There's also the option of making Zoom do this automatically. So if you have 200 people that you need to assign, it might be easier just to automatically assign them. But at the same time, you can jump into those rooms and assign certain people as hosts or co-hosts. Now, the other really useful thing when it comes to Zoom or WebEx is, let's say you're hosting an all-day conference and you have the main session and the agenda for that. If people need to jump into another area of the agenda, for example, let's say there's another breakout session that's focused on another topic. What people can do, depending on these settings, is jump into those other breakout sessions at their leisure. So that's a really cool feature with these breakout rooms. And at the end, you can bring people back in. You can give them a time to come back in or move them automatically. So you have the option of broadcasting message to all of them. But once you click close all rooms or end breakout sessions, you can bring people right back to the main room where they can maybe do a debrief or share the insights that they came up with in those breakout rooms. Those are just a few of the advanced features. We can go into further detail. We do trainings for the teachers, for example, that need to convert their curriculum from the classroom, from a physical classroom to the online classroom. So we can help with that as well. Those polling sessions, we can help with very effective polling methods to get valuable information. And then the whiteboard, you saw the difference between going from the usual Etch-a-Sketch board to something that actually draws information in from your audience and shares and informs them as well. So we can talk about that as well. But the basics, we had basics on the agenda as well. But before I move on to the just the basic setup of your home environment, any questions? Let's see, I'll give a couple of moments there. But yeah, there are just so many advanced features with all of the platforms out there. But again, these apply to pretty much all of them. Everything that we're sharing today pretty much applies to all of the platforms out there. All right, so let's go on to the home office. And this is what we all expected. This is what my neighbors thought they were expecting as well. Chatting with them, they were they looked forward to the work from home mandates here in Washington, but they quickly learned how things just started to get out of hand. So I'm the neighborhood nerd. People call me for advice on how to set up this and that. So that's another reason I love having this guide, is it's something I could just hand off to them. But we're going to talk about just the basics of getting your area set up, because I've seen some of you already. I've seen the backgrounds. I've seen the distracting things in the picture. But before we get into that, let's talk about the physical space. Let's talk about how your laptops that many of you are on right now, you're probably looking down at the monitor right now at the table. And this is the perspective that I get the top of your head. So a simple fix and an ergonomic fix is to raise that monitor or raise that laptop up to be at eye level, because your web camera is at the top of the bezel of your laptop. So that's a simple fix. Now, this is a link right here that goes to Amazon. It goes to the bestseller list for mounts and stands. And that's the other thing that's in this download, is a link to many different things that you can purchase for your home environment. Now, one thing that I added to my basic chair here was just a seat cushion, and that helped add another few hours of comfort. So simple things. You don't have to spend too much money out there to improve your workspace. Now, this was a huge thing that helped me, and that's the use of these blue light blocking glasses. And what that helps is, with me, it helped reduce eye strain. And I noticed a huge difference when I didn't use them. I had headaches before, but after using them, it was very noticeable. So it might help for you, it might not, but try it out. You never know. Now, this is probably the easiest thing that you can do to improve your experience in these video conferences, is just to update your computer, because security fixes happen in those updates, especially with Zoom, of course. So make sure that you do your part and make sure that you do your updates, because the last thing you want for your team is to spread a virus. Let's say you're opening up an attachment because you didn't update your computer. So be part of the solution and make sure you update your computer. And if you do have that virus, you might have to restore or reset everything on your computer. But it's horrible when you have to do that and you don't have your data. Now, we can't go into all of the details, but the details are in the download. So these links right here go to Windows and Mac on how to do those data backups. Now, one thing that you can also do A very simple fix. It's just to optimize your computer. So running the defrag for Windows or the hard drive optimization in a Mac. These are tips that are in these links here. So run through this and you will notice a difference in how your computer performs in waiting for something to load on screen. But then again, there's the network, waiting for things to download. And the other thing is, now that we're all on, many of us are on camera, we have to have the bandwidth. If you don't, you might be stuttery, your video might be slow, and you might not have the capability of using your video. So that means you have to use audio only. So a quick thing that you can do to check is just go to speed test. So this is a screenshot of speedtest.net. Once you hit go, it runs a download and an upload test. And the important thing here is the upload, because if you're expected to be on camera, have at least 5 to 10 megabytes of upload speed. Because if things such as maybe the kids are using Zoom as well, so that takes away from the bandwidth. So just make sure you have enough beforehand, or make sure that everyone in the household knows not to jump onto the web and stream things as you're presenting. So included in this are some tips on how to improve your network. And I didn't know this, but your router needs to be rebooted every once in a while, because it's just like a computer. It's got memory, it's got to be refreshed. Maybe the DNS servers need to be updated and changed. And there are more details in that if you click on that to improve your home network link. And then Wi-Fi, same thing. Your Wi-Fi access points are also miniature routers that need to be rebooted every once in a while. But then there's the placement. So things like that are in the tips that are available in the download. Now you might notice Sharon's got a pair of earbuds on. I have a headset on as well. And as I mentioned, it helps eliminate the background noise. But at the same time, if things go wrong, if you can't use video, make sure you're as crystal clear to your audience. They'll appreciate being able to hear you clearly. They will notice a big difference between this and you talking on your speakerphone. So one thing that you can do to enhance your presence is to use a headset with a noise canceling microphone or a set of earbuds. Now, when it comes to video, you might notice that I'm looking at you eye level right now. That's because I have my camera on a tripod right now. The other thing is, if you're using a laptop, then again, raise it up so that you're at eye level instead of looking down at your audience, because it helps with that contact. Remember, when you don't look at the camera, it gives your audience permission to disengage. But then again, even if you have the nicest camera in the world, it doesn't matter, because if you have poor lighting, then you could look like this shady character here. So just make sure you are lit in front as well, if not brighter than what's in the background. So speaking of backgrounds, one thing that we've seen used very often are these green screens and the virtual backgrounds in Zoom. And I'll explain to you why you should and shouldn't use them. As you can see here, this gentleman is using it to change his scenery behind him. But let's talk about this. We've seen people with poor lighting, and this is what happens when you try to use the green screen or virtual backgrounds. Sometimes the computer just doesn't process very well. And this is another reason why you want to optimize your computer, because some of what's happening here is the computer is not able to process quickly enough. Your wardrobe, some people just they forget that their colors, especially during St. Patrick's Day, they blend in with the green screen. So just be very aware. This is one of those times where you don't want to use green screen, or when you look like you have the Ghostbusters halo around you. So just make sure that you have the ability and the capability, and your equipment is enabled to do so. Now, this is how you do it. Again, this is in the download, so we won't go into detail there, but very, very easy to turn that feature on. Now, this is when you should use it, when it actually adds to your message, when you have the computer and the processing power to do it, when you have the proper lighting to do it. This is when you could use it. But again, use it when it adds to your message and does not detract from your message. So again, we have this in the download. These are links to all of the toys out there, all of the accessories that you need for your home office. But before we close, are there any questions that I can answer? Looks like I saw a couple pop up here. Let's see here. I got on a phone call. Well, let's see here.
So there's a question about how to manage time for focused work when you're working from home and feeling like they're always getting IMs, video calling, even when their status is set to busy or on call. So the question is, are there any tips? There's so many methods of communication overlapping. You know, what tips can you use to help with that? And go ahead, Rand.
That's in the eliminating distractions section. There's actually a link that helps with the apps and the settings that you can put on your computer. Now on your phone, there is a do not disturb feature. So for my iPhone here, for example, if I swipe up, I've got a do not disturb there. But I think for the newer iPhones, you swipe down and that's how you can access that feature. But that's for the iPhone. Actually, the eliminating distraction section has a link for apps as well.
And also on my computer, I will turn off notifications. So I'll say do not disturb. So I do not see the IMs coming in or the emails when I have to focus on something. And you can also turn your phone off or on airplane mode and just know, okay, for this next hour, I'm going to focus on something I have to get done, and I will get back to the people who are trying to reach me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what I've put on screen very quickly is this is a feature in Zoom. Now I'm looking at my second monitor, that's why I'm looking in this direction here. But you'll notice that there is a silent system notifications when sharing desktop feature. So what's nice about that is when you're sharing your screen, the last thing you want is to have something pop up on screen that is inappropriate for the meeting. So this is a very useful feature to turn on when you're using Zoom. I'm not sure if WebEx has that or not. Then there's also the option of just turning off the notifications. And that's, again, in the eliminating distractions section. But great questions. Sharon, I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball over to you here. So let's see here.
So you're going to click for me, though?
Yep.
Okay, great. So first of all, we really appreciate everyone being on this. We hope that we achieved our objective in terms of helping you get new tips for working effectively at home. If you want to continue with us, there's a couple ways. One is a free community of practice on LinkedIn. So you can go to this link, and this will also be available in that download that Randy's talking about. And we're going to continue to post tools during this time, best practices, and encourage dialogue. And so we encourage everyone to go check that community of practice out, and so we can continue to support each other as Weebies. Also, we are offering a webinar that's a 4-series webinar called Virtual Workplace Engagement, Where's the Water Cooler? And that's going to be once a week for 90 minutes. And it's going to have 4 modules. One is how to maximize technology to make your virtual meetings interactive. So that is something that we'll go into even more detail around the different platforms out there and how to do what Randy's doing today. And then building relationships virtually during challenging times. We still have to maintain relationships with our customers, with our stakeholders. So that's another module. And then we'll also talk about how to stay engaged and collaborative as a virtual team. That's so important because we're all spread out, we're isolating, social distancing. How do we stay engaged and collaborative as a virtual team? And finally, how do we ourselves stay authentically centered during these times of transition? Because it's so critical that we know how to navigate our insides as well, because we're often leading teams as business owners. So we are going to be offering this webinar, and all webinars will be recorded. If you're interested but the dates don't work, please contact Sam. We're going to be running this quite a few times this year. And then also, we are offering a special discount today to anyone who participated in this, all the way up to Saturday, actually, that you can have a 20% discount off of the $199, and you can use the promo code WeBank. And there's a link there that we'll also send to everyone. So this is a time to really learn how to operate in that virtual world. And that's why we are offering this webinar series. We really want to thank WeBank for sponsoring this webinar today and for gathering us, because we need to support each other. And we really hope we gave some valuable information. And we encourage you again to go ahead and join that community of practice. And also, we're collaborating with Patty Macy's organization. I know many of you know her as well, to do an ebook on this content. And once that's ready, we will also send that out to you, because I know we went quickly over some of this, but you will receive the handouts, you'll receive the ebook, so that you can actually continue to look things up. You might go, how do I do that poll again? And you can go back to the information that Randy shared. So with that, I really want to thank everyone. If there's any additional questions, please definitely reach out to us. You can reach out through Samantha at insideoutlearning.com, and we will answer any remaining questions that you may have.